Hello everyone and welcome to something a little bit the same, a little bit different. We will be doing the November 11th daily challenge, but the main purpose of this video is to talk about my continued impressions of the Dark Souls 2 beta given the second test I was a part of last night. So first and foremost, I should point this out early on that some of my impressions of some things are going to be a little bit skewed. About 2 hours into the 3 hours the beta was open, a message came up on screen saying that they were going to engage higher difficulty mode to help test and determine what the best difficulty for the final game would be and everything like that. Now, mind you, the game wasn't exactly easy before that, but things definitely got significantly more difficult after that message came up. So some of the things I'll talk about are things I got done before the difficulty increase, and they may not be wholly accurate. In terms of, what they would have been if I had gotten there after the difficulty spike went in. So one thing to note is that I think I mentioned in my last talk about this is that there were these guys called Sickle Knights. And essentially what those were they were these big guys who wielded two sickles, and they could move around pretty quick. They were big, they took a lot of damage, and they were really far more threatening than anything else in the area of the game that we were playing in at the time. So, for the most part, they didn't give me too much trouble. I was able to kill them my first time through the beta, but they always respawn, and they were definitely significantly harder than anything else that was coming across in that area of the beta. So it did seem a little bit lopsided. Even for Dark Souls, usually the difficulty levels of enemies are relatively consistent throughout an area. In this case, they were very much lopsided. You had these big guys that took a lot to take down that you had to deal with each time. And you also had these smaller guys who went down really easily. Oh god, I messed up. Oh well. But yeah, you also had these littler guys who were very easy to take care of. If you played safe and played in a Dark Souls, Demon Souls fashion, where you weren't taking unnecessary risks. So this whole, the Sickle Knights were they seemed out of place. They seemed like they were put there more so to show off one of the big enemies than they were to actually fit into the area. And the first time they respawned, which made it a little bit difficult each time you wanted to get up the path and get even into the paths that would eventually lead you to the bosses. You had to deal with these big guys that, if you were about the level you could expect to be by that point, or in my case lower due to all my deaths from not knowing how to make a torch, they were actually rather tough to kill and not just end up getting yourself killed. So, during my early impressions, those guys, they weren't a complete stopper, but without being able to pay my full attention to the game and with the fact that I hadn't been able to level at all by that point, they were definitely more difficult than I think was necessarily fitting for the rest of the area. Not because I think that the rest of the area should have been easy, but because I think that it should have been more closely resembling what was around it than what they were. In this version, they actually had it set where the Sickle Knights did not respawn, so you dealt with them as almost mini-boss type characters, and then were able to, from there, just be able to move through the level freely after that fact. I think that was probably a good decision. Nothing against hard enemies, that's why I love the Souls series, but when it comes down to these things are completely out of place with the rest of the area, it was kind of nice when they changed it where you didn't have to deal with them every time, which was making it kind of hard to progress comparatively. Spectacles, of course. So that was one nice change. But other than that, like I said, the early part of the beta was marked as easy mode by the virtue of having a later hard mode engaged. We did end up coming out a bomb ahead there, so I guess it works. And I don't really have any need to go back up, so... Oh, yeah, I guess I do, because I can't get back... Oh... Because I can't get back over there without using a bomb. I would rather use a rope. So... I didn't actually fight one of those guys after it went to the higher difficulty mode, but I'm certain that it would have been a much bigger challenge. A lot of the enemies that I ran into after the higher difficulty mode engaged were rogues that before that change weren't giving me much of a problem at all. Quite frankly, they were relatively simple to take care of, in all honesty. They were... they could swarm me like 2 or 3 at a time, and I was taking them out relatively easily. But, once the difficulty change went into effect, they became extraordinarily deadly when there were more than one of them at a time. And it seemed almost as if it was harder to pull only one of them at a time as well. Which came up, one of the people I know was showing off a little bit of it, and or talking about it a bit, and one of the things that you run into on your way to one of the bosses of the beta, the Chariot, he was trying to get there, and there are these 4 red phantoms that spawn into things when you're going toward the Chariot boss. And when I went through it, it was very easy to pull one of them at a time, and then use that to take them out, go back, pull the next one, and so on and so forth. The regular Soul strategy. However, once the difficulty spike went up is when he got there, because he was a bit late to getting into the beta. And when he went there, it was very difficult for him to get one pulled at a time. So I'm not sure if the difficulty actually only affected the enemies, or if it actually affected things like their draw distances and such that would affect, you know, how easy it is to pull one at a time. So I think that whatever it was that changed, it made everything significantly harder. And I really liked the difficulty that showed up after that. I think that it was a little bit on the easy side beforehand, and at that point it became more like you would expect from a Souls game. So I think that it was a wise decision. I think that it was a wise decision to bump up the difficulty, and I'm hoping that that's about what they decide the final difficulty to be, because I think that was right around what it should be for a Dark Souls game. So all that aside, let's talk about some of the other things that were going on. So first of all, if you didn't see my last video where I talked about the Dark Souls 2 beta, I was playing as the warrior class. You know, my first run through of Dark Souls, I was very much focused on the strength weapons. Oh god, I forgot to bring the key down. I don't have any ropes. No! It's gonna be a pain in the neck. But, yeah, I was playing as the soldier class, which of course is melee focused, because that's pretty much how I played through the first Dark Souls on my first run through, was just focusing on that melee combat and everything. So that's where I put my focus into the beta, because I feel like it is where I am most attuned to in terms of the Souls games. And it worked quite well. You know, there were some times where I felt like maybe the Zweihanders, which is the weapon I was using, there were some times I felt like maybe its attack range wasn't quite as high as it should have been. Or it's, no, that's not what I meant. It felt at times like the, time delay on using it were a bit higher than you would have expected. The amount of stamina I used and the time it took to do a swing were kind of extremely long. Like, if you use a Zweihander in Dark Souls 1, you know that it was slow, but it was still pretty serviceable. The same is the case with 2, but it seemed like it was a lot more slow, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It just at times felt like it was kind of hard to pull off the kind of maneuvers that you needed to do to deal with the enemies that you were encountering, if you know what I mean. So that was kind of a worrisome moment, but what was really bothering me about this Wayhander was when you would attack with it once, you would, you know, when you would attack with it once with the heavy attack, you would do a straightforward slash downwards from the point of contact, from the direction you were holding. But when you attacked with the heavy attack the second time, instead of attacking in the direction that you were facing when you did that first strike in any way, you know how with heavy weapons, a lot of times in Dark Souls 1, when you would attack with the heavy attack twice in a row, you would probably tend to turn around, not turn around, you would tend to, what am I looking for here? What's this word? When you were attacking with them again, you would tend to kind of do an upswing where you grabbed onto the weapon and you kind of swung it back upwards from where it was down from your first attack. In Dark Souls 2, instead of that happening in the beta, what happened was I would do an attack and it would hit the ground in one direction, and if I did a heavy attack before recovering from that animation, it wouldn't do any kind of attack that was useful. What it actually did was turn me around and attack in the opposite direction. Now, I mean, I guess that's encouragement not to spam attacks, but at the same time, there is something to be said for ensuring that you're not gonna just, oh my god, monkey, stop stealing my money. There is something to be said for ensuring that, you know, if you hit the button too early, it doesn't screw you over. And for a very slow, very heavy weapon like this Wayhander, if you get turned around while you're trying to do a second attack because you hit the button too early, and you end up doing the alternate attack, so to speak, which is the same attack in reverse, if that happens when you're using such a slow weapon, that can be a death sentence in a game where things do as much damage as they do like this. So, you know, there were a couple times where I attacked with it once, and then the second attack, which I hit a little bit too early, ended up causing me to... Perfect. Ended up causing me to... What am I looking for here? I keep losing my train of thought. The second attack ended up causing me to fall backwards and end up losing my ability. I turn away, and because of that, and because of the delay in the attack, it made it almost impossible for me to not get killed if I accidentally did that second attack too quick, which is not a good thing. You know, the Souls games are difficult, but they're supposed to be fairly difficult. Not, you know, I died because I accidentally hit the button too quick and that caused me to do an attack that turned me in the opposite direction with a lot of attack animation. It's supposed to be, you know, I died because I made a mistake that, you know, I could have done something differently about, and it wasn't just a mistake of timing in terms of pressing a button, it was a mistake of how I played my weapon. So that was driving me crazy, the fact that, you know, if I hit R2 a little bit too soon, instead of doing any kind of attack in the direction I was facing, I would invariably turn around and attack the opposite direction. Now, I mean, admittedly, that does make some level of sense when it comes to the mechanic of trying my best to... Or what am I looking for here now? It did work when it came to trying to figure out what I had going on exactly. Oh god. And by that I mean, you know, a lot of times you're trying to get that next attack out at the very moment that your first attack ends. But if you're trying to do that and you might get punished for trying to get the attack out perfectly by hitting the button a bit too soon, and not just not attacking or not doing a weaker swinging attack, you know, you're actually being punished by getting turned around and locked into this attack animation that you can't get out of. That's not a good thing. That is not good for difficulty. That's a bad style of difficulty, where a slight misstep in timing doesn't just, you know, cost you an attack when the enemy is open. It actually causes you to do an attack that is both literally worthless and has you trapped in an animation long enough where if there are any enemies around, which there probably are if you're attacking, you're going to be screwed. You're not going to be able to get back from that before they can hit you. So I do feel like that needs to be changed, because that was endlessly aggravating in the worst kind of way. But other than that, the weapon handled great. Since the last beta, I did realize that there are actually different hit zones on the weapons now, so to speak. I don't know really how else to put that. But let's say that I hit with the very tip of my Zweihander versus right in the heft of the blade, right in the middle. Or if I hit right near the hilt, they were too close to be far enough away to get a full strike in. Oh, I noticed that was going to happen as soon as I jumped. But it wasn't this, and it's not the same damage. So if you were to attack with the Zweihander when the enemy was right next to you, you're going to do very little damage compared to if you hit them with the heft of the blade, where it is the strongest. That is a hugely different thing than what we saw in Dark Souls 1. It's no longer just, you know, if you hit with this weapon, you're going to do somewhere around this much damage. But now, in addition to having to plan your strikes, you do need to plan out where your strikes are going to hit on the blade. You need to space yourself properly, or else it's not just a matter of you might get retribution if you don't. It's a matter of you aren't going to do as much damage if you don't. And that is incredible in my opinion, because it adds a whole new level to an already very deep combat system by forcing you to not just think about if you're going to hit the enemy, but to think about where you're going to hit the enemy and how you're going to hit the enemy. Honestly, once I got the hang of it, I was able to, for the most part, get those full strikes most of the time. You know, I would occasionally mess up, which is more so due to unfamiliarity with the system than it is anything else. But for the most part, the system felt real nice. You know, you couldn't just stand around with a greatsword and abuse the range advantage to do huge damage to your opponents anymore. Now you needed to actually think things through and hit with the sword as you rightfully should. Which is, of course, not the case as it was in Dark Souls 1. You get that, I don't know why I just went down here. I guess I can just walk out and go back up. But you don't get that ability to abuse the attack distance of the weapons anymore. Because if you are trying to go at the full range, you're going to do nothing but make it harder for yourself to get a hit that is actually worth landing. We're going to use one more rope here. So that was one mechanic that I absolutely adored once I got used to it. At first I was kind of thrown by it. Like, if you remember, I think in my last time I talked about this, I mentioned that there was a bit of feeling like maybe I didn't have the strength requirement for this Zweihander. It turns out that that's not the case. All the case was that I was, what am I looking for? All the case was that I was not wielding it appropriately. I was wielding it like I would in Dark Souls 1, just swinging at anything that was within range, instead of trying to hit it with the proper part of the blade, and that was messing me up drastically. So I do think that is one of the nicer changes that was going on in the beta from my experience, was that, oops, didn't really mean to grab that. Yeah, I kind of trapped myself. I could have used the rope, that would have made sense. But that was one thing that really changed my view on that weapon as a whole, was that I realized that it wasn't a matter of my strength being too low or anything. It was just a matter of me not wielding the weapon properly, which is exactly what I want from a Souls game. You know, the fact that you get punished if you attack just a little bit too early, that's the bad kind of difficulty. The fact if you get punished for trying to abuse your range by doing less damage, which, as it would happen in the real world, is actually the case, you would not hurt someone nearly as much hitting them with the hilt of, hitting them near the hilt of a great sword, or even hitting them with the point of a greatsword that you would if you hit them with the heavy main part of the blade. So that is the kind of thing that I want to see more of, is those kind of things where it makes the game more difficult in a way that just means you have to learn the system, not in a way that means that if you make a slight mistake, you're screwed. So now on that note, one thing that, I guess I should talk a little bit about the bosses that I fought. The first one was the chariot boss. Essentially when you walk into the room, there is a big chariot that starts going around. There are a bunch of skeletons that spawn. You don't necessarily realize it right away, but there are necromancers who bring those skeletons back to life, much as in the catacombs in Dark Souls 1. And so you have to deal with those guys if you want the skeletons to stay dead. The boss itself is pretty much unhittable in his starting state, because you have no way to do damage to him without getting hit by his chariot. But if you are to... I guess there really is just no shop on this floor. But if you are to figure out the strategy to him, then it becomes a whole different story. Essentially what you have to do is there's a lever at the far end of the circle, and if you pull that, it causes the chariot to crash and you just fight the horses, which is the actual boss battle. You know, the first time through, I had heard about the lever beforehand, so I knew what I was looking for. But the first time through, I was running around, I ended up getting... The necromancer was inside one of the safe zones from the chariot, and when I tried to go in there, I was obviously bumping up against him, and so I wasn't able to actually get inside. But when it came to when it came to trying to actually do anything to him, it wasn't, or the second time, once I knew the necromancer was there, I thought there was only one. So I kind of ran to right where he was, you know, just one segment at a time. I would get to the next safe zone and then wait, get to the next safe zone and then wait. And eventually I managed to get all the way down to the necromancer. I killed him, and some of the skeletons were still coming back to life, which is when I found out there were more than one necromancer in the area. Not really that big of a surprise, but somehow I didn't expect it. So I died on that run because I got hit by the chariot again, trying to deal with a bunch of skeletons that were all attacking me from me not attacking them at all. So finally the third run, I ended up just running as far as I could until I got to a safe zone, pausing there, running as far as I could till I got to a safe zone, pausing there. Eventually I got to the lever. Once I did, the boss itself was easy. Now this is one of the things I did before they sent out the thing saying that they were initiating higher difficulty. So I don't know if he would have been harder significantly after that change. But what I do know is that the boss itself wasn't all that... Really? Really? The boss itself wasn't all that difficult. In the sense that he was not... once he got to his phase where he was just the horses, all that you really had to do was dodge his attack and then strike, dodge his attack and then strike. And he was a pretty slow enemy, so dodging his attacks wasn't the hardest thing in the world, and you had ample time to strike back before you moved onwards. So that was definitely, you know, the boss itself as a whole was much more difficult than actually fighting the boss was, because by the time you're fighting the boss, what's left of him is not that bad. The other boss in the beta is the Skeleton Lord. That guy I only got the chance to fight once. After fighting him once and dying while trying to learn what to do was when they turned up the difficulty, and the path to get there was really long, and there was only one bonfire on the way that was blocked off by a... I don't know why I just stood there and took that. that was blocked off by a door that you need a key for. I have no idea where the key was. So there was no bonfire on the way, and it was a pretty long walk from the bonfire that I last rested at to the Skeleton Lord. So along the way, once the difficulty was tuned up, I was still trying to learn how to best deal with each area, and I died a lot. And since there was only about 45 minutes left in the hour by the time that happened, you know, it was just too far along for me to really have a chance at getting back to him and beating him that was any good. But essentially with him, he kind of had almost like Pinwheel. There were 3 of them that you were attacking, but instead of, you know, all of them being an illusion except one, they were all real, they were all attacking you, they were all doing damage, and you had to attack all 3. It did seem like he was going to have a second phase. Either that or the skeletons he spawns were part of his health bar, because I killed one of them and one of the 3 and nowhere near a third of his health bar was gone. So I'm not sure exactly what you had to do in order to beat him, other than just kill the 3 big guys. Maybe the skeletons he spawned were part of his health. Maybe it was just a matter of maybe it was just a matter of there was another phase to him after he defeated all the 3 small-sized ones. There was a bigger one or something. I'm not entirely sure. What I do know is that I definitely was nowhere close to beating him on the time where I fought him. I had one of the 3 Lord bodies down completely, one down like 2/3 of its health, and then the third was completely untouched pretty much. So yeah, I can't really speak for the difficulty of the boss entirely, but part of the thing that was getting to me was, you know, especially using a close range slow weapon like the Zweihander, there, with the 3 of them attacking and them spawning a bunch of skeletons, there was a difficulty in getting my distance enough to be able to, what am I looking for? What am I looking for here? Oh yeah, to get enough distance to heal, and since you were pretty much under constant attack, that did pose a little bit of a threat. So, you know, I probably could have done better than I did against him, but, oh god. But, for the situation that I was in terms of learning the boss while I was trying to fight him, it definitely could have gone better. Oh, sorry, had to concentrate there for a second. But yeah, he spawned an absolute crazy amount of skeletons. It was honestly kind of difficult to keep up with. I didn't really attack the skeletons at all, which might have been part of my problem, was I wasn't getting rid of the spawns. But after I killed one of them, there were so many skeletons on the screen that I felt like my best option was to just run and try to lure out one at a time of the lords and attack them before I worried about the skeletons. Didn't work out for me, not the least of which because they have a magic attack that they shoot at you. So, you know, even if you can keep your distance, they have a chance of hitting you. But also because they were just very, very difficult in their own right when they got up close. So I think that actually the hard mode had initiated while I was on the path to the Skeleton Lord boss, and I think that it took effect while I was in there. It actually caused them to be harder than they were before that point. So I think I was... No way I could have seen that coming. So I think I was on the hard mode of the Skeleton Lord boss versus the easy mode of the Chariot boss. But they were definitely very difficult. I could have probably beat them in the next try or two. It was a matter of just learning how to deal with them that was the problem. That's beautiful. So yeah, that was pretty much my experience with the beta. The red phantoms they had were interesting. One of them was wielding a big sickle, or 2 of them were wielding big sickles. The third one was wielding, what was it, a whip. The third and fourth were wielding a whip. The whip, if you manage to draw him into attacking with just the whip and not kicking you and draining your stamina, the whip barely touched your stamina. If you had decent poise, you were going to just completely survive anything that they could throw at you. Whereas the guys with the sickles would drain your stamina really quick and cause you problems. I also got invaded a couple times. The first time I was up against a guy who was using a hand axe, he was using a greatsword, and during that time I was coming out on top. I was better at wielding the greatsword than he was. But the second guy, then he ran off to where there were still big enemies alive, that if I went over there I was going to get killed by them instead of the invader. So I waited for him to come back, and what he had done was switch to a quick hand axe, which my Zweihander just couldn't match up against in the least. So, oh god, why? So, yeah, that was difficult to deal with, but he ended up killing me. It was a pretty close fight in the end, but once he switched to that hand axe, I did not have a chance to beat him very well, because I was just not ready to fight something that much faster than me. The other invader that I got was when I was AFK for a moment, actually. I went away to get a drink, and when I came back there was a bloodstain at the bonfire. I had waited right next to the bonfire, which in Dark Souls 1 was a safe zone, essentially, where you couldn't be invaded if you were standing right next to the bonfire. On 2, that does not appear to be the case, because while standing right next to the bonfire, I came back to my own bloodstain with my souls right there, and that is not anywhere close to where I had died the time before. So I'm not sure if that was a glitch that I was able to be invaded there or what. But I do think that even if you're not resting at a bonfire, if you're standing in the zone of it, it should be like Dark Souls 1 where you can't be invaded. Not so much because it is, not fair. I don't want to put it that way. What it more so is a matter of, you don't want to have it where there are no safe zones for players to stand in if they need to take care of something. Before, if you ran and stood next to the bonfire, you were safe until you came back and left that area, whether you were human or not. When it comes to 2, if it's a matter of you have to be actively resting at the bonfire, it's not that much of a difference, but it does make it more difficult for you to find a safe zone and take care of things in a timely manner. If you are having to worry about not just getting to the bonfire, but sitting down and resting at it, it's not a big change, but it is enough of a change where you can't just, okay, I died, when I respawn I'm going to be at the bonfire, so I'll AFK until I respawn, and then when I get back I'll jump in. You would now have to wait until you respawn and then go off to do whatever you're going to do. Once again, not a huge difference, but it is one that I feel would be kind of pointlessly annoying. If you're going to grant people immunity when they're resting at the bonfire, why not grant them immunity when they're standing a foot away from it, or in the same room as it as the case may have been. Because the one I was at was kind of like the one in Undead Burg, the first bonfire that you come to after Firelink Shrine, in that it was separate from the rest of the area in its own little room. And I just don't understand why they wouldn't make that whole room a safe zone from invasions instead of making it where you could still be invaded in there if you weren't actively resting at the bonfire. So that kind of bugged me, but not a huge deal. Other than that, I got summoned into a world as a blue phantom once by way of the Soldier's Covenant. It was kind of funny. I don't think that the invader actually knew what was going on, because he came running by me, and of course the blue phantoms that are summoned that way don't aggro enemies, so I was pretty much able to just sit there and relax, and then and he came running by me, didn't stop to deal with me at all, even though the enemies were ignoring us both, and he tried to just run straight by me. There was a cliff right nearby, and I just kind of swung at him once and he fell into the cliff, and that was that. So that guy just didn't really know what was going on, I'm pretty sure. But, regardless of if he knew what was going on or not, that was successful. I just easily knocked him off the edge, and that was that. I don't really know if there's anything else I have to add, really. It was a lot of fun. It was definitely Dark Souls. Especially once the difficulty got increased. It had every bit the same difficulty that Dark Souls 1 or 2. Dark Souls 1, Demon Souls had. So I think people who are fans of the series are going to enjoy it as it stands currently. Like I said, there were some things that were a little bit questionable to me, but as a whole, it was not that bad. You know, I did not really want to stop playing at any given point. I wanted to keep going in the beta, not just to see more of it, but because I was having fun with it. I kept dying and going back to the same place and trying a new strategy. You know, it was Dark Souls. So if that's what you're worried about, if you're worried about with the new director that it's not going to be the same type of game, you don't have to worry about that. This is every bit a Dark Souls game. Or a Souls game, I guess I should say. Not just Dark Souls, but Souls in general. And there's really nothing to worry about in terms of how it's coming along. It's coming along well. There are some things that need tweaked, there are some glitches that need resolved, but as a whole, the game is coming along very well. And I'm very happy to be able to say that, because I was one of the people who was a bit worried. Oh god, oh god, oh god. You know, I was one of the people who was a bit worried about things, but it's turning out really well. The menus, I don't like the new inventory menu. It is very difficult. In a way it's easier, but in a way it's also a lot harder to navigate than the old inventory was. So I'm not sure how I feel about that, but in terms of the actual, what am I looking for here? In terms of the actual, you know, separating things into pages, it wasn't bad, but it just felt like they could have done it a lot neater and a lot more easy to navigate. So that is one thing that I would like to see a little bit different come the time of the final game, is to see it where there is a little bit easier to navigate menu system. So I need to check how much time I have for this Olmec fight. I'm at 3:56, so I got about 4 minutes. Good. Good. That's more than enough bombs. Come on, Olmec. We're gonna get Spelunky on this Dark Souls talk. That might be good. Not quite, but it was kind of close, I guess. I got a couple extra bombs to play with, so that works. So make this hole big enough for him to fall into. Oh god. Come on, Olmec. Go, 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 go. We're gonna get it, we're gonna get it! Yes! That should do it. Yes, Spelunky! Yay, Dark Souls 2 beta talk. So yeah, as a whole, Dark Souls 2 beta, very fun. Very much look forward to March, seeing how the full game comes together. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you don't mind that I set this over Spelunky despite that series being over. But I felt like this was a game that I could play without having to really think about the commentary of the game itself. Because everyone who knows, and I think most people know Spelunky, and I know for a fact that anyone who follows this channel a decent amount knows Spelunky. So, I felt like it was probably the safest option. Regardless, as always, thank you guys for watching. I do hope you enjoyed. I hope that you continue to enjoy the content on this channel. I might talk some more about the Dark Souls 2 beta at a later date, especially if anyone has any questions about it. Oops, that's not what I meant to do. All these brokenly fast times that are probably all using some type of change. Oh, that one is very close to Banana's time, but I think he is... I mean, he's definitely the one who has the recording of it to show that there wasn't anything done to make it easier. And we're actually very close to Bear Taffy, who is a well-known Spelunky player. But yeah, I might talk some more about the Dark Souls 2 beta. If you have any questions about it, feel free to leave a comment. Hit me up on Twitter, same at MendosMan8. Or, you know, if you want to, if I stream in the next couple days and you want to stop by there to ask me some questions, feel free. I will be happy to talk more about it. But for now, I'm going to get out of here. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time. Later, everyone. I forgot how to stop streaming.